Perfect. We're rolling. Thank you very much for taking the time, Breezy. I really appreciate it. I mean, you're getting ready to hit the slopes, get back on the road. Tomorrow's the big day. Are you excited?
I am very excited. Yes, we're driving to Copper tomorrow to do final prep period before the season. So, yeah, I always like Copper, and I haven't been there for a couple years. So I'm excited to be back there and get some speed runs in there.
Yeah, it should be good. I mean, it's good. How different has this like off season and all the prep and everything been so different with COVID and everything else? I mean, I know they don't have any of the North American stops, right? No Lake Louise or like Beaver Creek for the World Cups right there. They're keeping everything in Europe, right?
Yeah, so for the World Cup tour, everything's going to be in Europe, except for they are still planning on doing the test event in Beijing after the World Championships. But I think they're kind of at a point where they're like, we'll see where we're at in whatever it is. I think that's late February. So that's kind of like TBD. But yeah, so everything's been in Europe, and then we had a lot of our training in the US canceled early season, so we didn't get as much speed training. And then we finally got over to Europe at the beginning of September, and that was kind of when our speed training started.
So is that like for you going into a season, I mean, obviously it's completely different than normal. You're usually traveling and on the road a lot, like way more. So has that been nice, like mentally, to kind of get a little bit time to step back, spend some more time with family, obviously, with everything that's going on? Has that kind of been a little bit like refreshing compared to the usual grind that you guys are all on?
It's been nice to have some time with family and stuff, which and I've spent more time at home, but then it's also been like, I've been injured for 2 years and haven't had a lot of training for the last couple of years. So I was kind of looking forward to like a normal summer, which I haven't had before the Olympics even. And so I didn't really get that this year, but, it's okay. I guess normal is relative for me at this point after everything.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, that's how we first met. My wife was injured at the same time that you were, right? Kind of going through, and then became rehab buddies. And
yeah,
I mean, it's quite the crazy process to kind of see you grow through that injury, because I mean, your trajectory, you started having some really good results and very promising start. You get your first Olympics under the belt, 7th there, have some great training, and then obviously you have a setback. But I mean, when you're in this sport, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's just a matter of when, especially when you're flying down the hill doing downhill 80 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour. Like, things are going to go wrong at some point in time.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not a question of if, it's a question of when. I think after my first injury, I was like, okay, like this happens to everybody. Like, I've paid my dues. Like, you have to like do this at some point. And then there was a little bit after the second injury where I was like, okay, when does this end? Like, when can I be normal again? And like, is the sport ever gonna like let me do it again? But yeah, it's definitely when you're running at 80 miles an hour, you really have zero room for error. There's a lot less crashes in downhill and Super G than there are in like the tech events. But when you go down, it's not good.
Right. Yeah. No, but I mean, that's where you put so much training in that off season, though. And I know you had one of those quotes when I was looking at that, I thought, when you were talking about, especially after going through the injury and setting goals in times of heartbreak and also in times of success, and kind of using those daily goals to be able to propel you forward when the times are tough and the times are dark. It's always one of the things I think that's like most overlooked, is everyone talks about success and how great things are when everything's going good. It's a lot easier. Confidence is high. Everything's rolling and that momentum's kind of going with you. But when that injury kind of strikes and then it's a monumental setback, I mean, it's 9 to 10. I mean, it's a big period of time, especially ACL or something like that. There's no real quick way. And obviously technology, everything's gotten better, but still you're stuck going in, doing rehab, doing quad sets, doing all heel slides, the same, I mean, monotonous things every day. And the progress is so slow, right? I mean, I remember for me, there's times you're hitting your head against the wall and your buddies will reach out for you, and you hear from them when they're on the tour, like, hey, checking in on you every once in a while, and you're like, really kind of wish, it's kind of sucks to hear that you guys are all having a great time traveling around, and I'm stuck here. Yeah, I'm great.
Yeah.
Icing.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like, I mean, you probably have this in like moguls, but you go from like is like kind of like the most like complex thing, like going down an icy ski slope off of and over jumps and like through all this like crazy terrain at like 80 miles an hour, or like for you, you're like doing these like crazy tricks, to like the most simple thing, like straighten and bend your leg, get your muscle to fire, like, and to like watch yourself be unable to do that like most basic thing when you're so used to being able to doing like those crazy complex things is so hard, mentally and emotionally.
No,
But
totally.
yeah, you just like have to like start small and be like, these quad sets are going to be slightly better than yesterday's quad sets, and go from there. And that's something that that helped ground me, is like, okay, it's just a little bit better than yesterday, and you don't get like quite so overwhelmed by kind of the magnitude of the whole thing.
And for you, are you more of a daily kind of goal setter, or is it like, how do you kind of break that down when you're trying to make your progress, whether it's in the gym or on the slopes? Do you look at it of like a monthly breakdown of like, okay, here's where I want my strength numbers to be, here's where I want my time to be, and then you break that down into a week? Or is it daily, like, okay, these are the 3 things for my day that I want to kind of try and attack and take care of?
I'm more in general of like a month to month kind of person, but I am like very much like always trying to exceed what I did yesterday. Like that's sort of my like, I guess you could call it like perfectionism or whatever, but like it's just like I'm always like, part of the reason why I got into this sport is because I'm always like interested in like pushing my limits and like seeing how far I can go personally. And so I just like am like, okay, what can I do today that I couldn't do yesterday? And like I do get like, I have my program, and I get like Avital is totally like this too, your wife, but she, we're both like super methodical, like check every box, dot every I, and there's like no like corner cutting, and it's like very kind of fastidious way of like going through rehab and just like general too.
I think it helps when you have all that like marked out too in the future, when you come to periods of struggle or something like that. Like when you have everything journaled out, you have everything kind of broken down, you can look back to those periods of not only when things are not going well, but when things are going well. Be like, okay, what was I doing during these days of training when, I was hitting my fastest times down the hill, or, what can I go back to and kind of lean on when maybe the confidence isn't so high? I mean, for you finally broke through, you came back, and your second event back, you were right back in the hunt. You got two fifths too. I mean, you really came out, crushed it and I mean, were your expectations that, or were your expectations, I'm just happy to be back and get to be doing this again, doing the sport that I love? I mean, what kind of expectations did you have? Because it's always one of those hard balances, right? I mean, you learn so much, and I feel like for most people it helps to have the injury to give you that real love and appreciation. Because I know for me personally, it's like, boom, when it's taken away for a season and you're able to get that opportunity to get back to it, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing, just to be at the top of the course, just to be around, the competitors and get those butterflies going. And what was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I've always said that like I don't think that I like necessarily like took the sport for granted beforehand, but you just can't totally understand it in the same way. I don't think most people like take their sport for granted, but when it does get taken away from you, you really just do understand it on a deeper level, like what it means to you in a way you just can't beforehand. And so I came back, and I did like kind of mentally have to like think through some of that stuff, like, because I was pushing my timeline a lot, and I was like, okay, like I'm pushing this timeline, like what if it doesn't go well? Like, am I like, do I want to race or do I want to race to win? And like, if I'm racing to win, is this like the best, trajectory and all that kind of stuff? And I did try to wrap my head around like, okay, I'm like coming back and I'm like willing to, like, I love this so much that I'm willing to kind of suck at it. And
but that's like, and like, knowing you, that is such like a battle with your personality, because as you talked about earlier, like checking the box, and you have part of that aggro, like, hey, I'm gonna get this done, and I'm here to win. I mean, I remember we did like a pumpkin carving party, and you had like 3 pumpkins carved in a matter of like 10 minutes. You're like, boom, done. Look at this. Check this out. It's good to go. Boom. It's like, well, we were just carving pumpkins. All right.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't like just to clarify about the pumpkin carving. That wasn't against other people. I'm just like, I just get like very into things when I do them.
That's your personality though. So to be going in,
So no, it was tough, because I was like, okay, sometimes when people come back from injuries too soon, they suck. Mm-hmm. And like, am I willing to suck? And I was like, I think I'm willing to suck. Mm-hmm. But I did want to do well. And I was like, I'm going to do everything possible to not suck, mm-hmm. and to like do this right. But like being away from the sport, I realized that like my love of the sport wasn't based entirely in me being good at it. It mm-hmm. was also based in just doing it. And so that was where I was like, okay, like I'm willing to like risk it and have this be not good, because I want it that much. And also like, especially after my second injury, I say like, and this is like a pro and a con, but it's sort of just like this reality that I had to face, is that like, I wanted it so bad that I was like greedy. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get injured again, like tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. But like, I like want to race, and I want to do it now, and I have to do it now, because I no longer like had a lot of trust in my ability to like stay uninjured. And so that was like tough, but I was like, that was also like part of it, I think too, on why, as I was like, my body feels good right now, and I can't say what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day, but mm-hmm. all I can say is that it feels good right now. And so all that I can do and what I have to do is ski as fast as I possibly can right now.
Right.
And like worry about tomorrow.
Yeah. Kind of focus on it day at a time. So that's kind of why when you're saying you're greedy, I mean, is that like pushing up that kind of timeline and wanting to get back to it? Because I mean, the normal timeline of coming back was like what, 12 months, about a year. And how long were you when you were, from that ACL to back on snow, back like in the gate competing?
Well, yeah, I got injured in the middle of June, and I started racing again at the beginning of January.
Okay.
So it was, I think, slightly under 7 months.
Yeah.
I started skiing again, like, I want to say like 5.5 months after injury, which was a very like tight timeline. Mm-hmm. And like I had basically I think I trained like maybe 5 times before I got back in a race course. Mm-hmm. And so it was like those things where I was just like, I was progressing through things, and every step that I took, it was like, I felt good in every step. It was like, I got back on skis, and it was like, okay, this just like feels like I'm skiing again. It doesn't feel like I don't know how to do this. This feels like I never left. And then I got back in gates, and I was like, again, this like feels like I never left. Mm-hmm. And, get back on the speed skis, same thing. So I was like, I don't know what a World Cup hill is going to be like, because I haven't been on it in a long time. Mm-hmm. But like, I'm going to take that risk because I'm greedy, because I don't know, like, because basically like halfway through my like slow and methodical recovery, where I was like, doing lots, I was planning on having, tons of extra training before I got into a race gate.
Mm-hmm.
I got injured halfway through that training. And so I was like, maybe
I
I
want to
just
go through that again. Yeah. Right.
So yeah, I had like, it was tough because my injury was in June, which is kind of uncommon. Like a lot of people get injured in kind of March or like kind of that preseason area. And obviously if you get injured preseason, you miss a season, then you have like a full prep period to come back. But June was like, it was late, later than normal for like a lot of people get injured also in March, and then they kind of miss the whole prep season, but they probably don't miss, like, they might miss a full season or they might not. Like they kind of have that choice at that point. Whereas mine, like I was like really kind of pushing timetables just because of when I was injured. So that was kind of like my choice. And I can't necessarily like recommend that for other people. Like I knew a lot of people who compared me to like other rehabbing people, and they're like, oh, like you made like so-and-so look like silly in their recovery. And you're like, no, like absolutely not. Like you cannot compare people in their recovery. Like I just did what I had to do.
Sure.
And
yeah, I mean, that's so tough psychologically too, because it does come down to that level of trust and being able to trust in that knee, that not when times are good and you're going well, but when you get into that compromised position that you are inevitably going to end up in, that all of that effort put in the off season is going to come back and you're going to be right where you need to be. And boom, those hamstrings are going to engage, or that quad, and your knee's nice and stable and you're back at it. It is one of those things though. And I think that's super interesting when the slow, methodical way, and boom, you have a little bit of a setback there. And you're like, okay, I need to get back in the gate. I need to get back in that feeling and that love and that joy. I want to be back on the downhill course, and let's push it a little bit. I mean, that also fits your like aggressive personality of, all right, I want to get this done. I want to attack it, which I think you kind of need when you're in downhill. When you're going 80 miles an hour, like you can't be timid, because that's how you're going to get hurt, right? Like you have to be aggressive. You have to, I mean, take the narrowest line, right? I mean, if that's the fastest person down the hill, you got to take the line that's right in between death and glory, right? It's this fine line. And that's like some of the favorite moments of my career, the couple of times where I was able to be on the rails and like, okay, I am right on the period of disaster, or this could go really well. And that is so much fun, and that is addicting, right? I mean, it's like, oh, I want more of that. And so when that's taken away for a couple of years, and then you have a setback, it's like, damn it, screw this. Like, let's just get back and get me back in the gate. I'm good to go.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Like one of the things that I definitely like found, like I know sometimes, and sometimes doctors can do this too, where they like tell athletes like, oh, this is like the worst knee injury I've ever seen, or like I haven't seen a knee injury this bad in 3 years. And like after they're feeling like they like, their problems are like really large. Like I was always trying to keep them small, because I was like, when I come back, like I want to have like full confidence. And like, and yes, like if you ski timidly, like in downhill, like you lean in, you're risking that, like that crash, that edge catch, that whatever. Like you have to ski like nothing can hurt you, like nothing can harm you, and that's actually like the safest way to ski.
Reckless abandon.
But that is like on this fine line, because yes, like when I got injured the first time, it was because I was like pushing too hard. I was like pushing beyond. And so there's kind of like a mix there for sure. But I like very much, like I remember like my surgeon, like if he was like, this is no problem, this knee is like all good. And then like a couple months later, he was like, feeling pretty good about himself and feeling pretty good about my recovery. And he's like, you realize you like almost dislocated your knee. Like you basically dislocated your knee. And I was like, Jeff, I did not dislocate my knee. basically dislocate my knee. I like, did this and this, and that was it. Like, there's no like, we don't get to like expand this.
Yeah.
We have to shrink this. Like,
yeah.
You have to like make it small and be like, this is fine. I'm good. My knee's good. Mm-hmm. While like also being able to be like, I need to be safe and things like that. So it's a very fine line for sure.
No, and I think that's really a great approach because, I mean, 90% of those rehabs really are so psychological. I mean, I had so many friends that would get beat up or hurt, and then they go through the doctor and then the rehab, and then they would never come back. It would be the same or even close just because they could never get that trust. There was always that kind of barrier there of like, well, is this thing going to happen again? Or is it, they couldn't get back to being on that fine line, that edge, just because psychologically, I mean, it really is a difficult thing to overcome. And even as the technology's gotten better and better with it, I mean, there's a lot of sacrifice and that goes into it. But so the psychological part, I mean, that's the fun thing about that rehab, right? If there is a fun thing, you really get to work on your mind. I mean, the physical stuff kind of sucks doing those, I know for me, I was reading as much as I could and like, okay, what do I need to do to get better? And like, I really started to take my diet seriously after, really started, I didn't drink anything for about a year after I was done. I was like, okay, no alcohol, no, like, let's see how much of a difference I can make in 1 year, and then start to ease things back in and kind of really take this chance because it was taken away from me. And I was at the time in my life was like, all right, maybe I should be done. Maybe I should go to school. Maybe I should do this, or, are you going to throw all the eggs back in that basket and kind of put in the time? I remember sitting at Squatters down in Salt Lake with my dad, and he's like, so, might be time to go back to school. What do you think? I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going back in. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
But it is those dark questions you have to ask, right?
Yeah, no, you have that, like, there's always that little voice of like there's these people who get injured who just like, for whatever reason, like, it's not even totally clear to like anybody, but they come back 100% physically. And for whatever reason, they just never reach that level of performance that they had. And that was like the scariest thing for me, because I was pretty sure that like physiologically, like, things were fixed and they'd done a good job. Like, but I wasn't, like, in part because you don't totally know why those people don't make it back, because if they knew what their problem was, they'd probably be able to figure it out. But so I was like, am I like, I just like can't be that person. And so you do have that, although I also like working on the mental side of things was good and valuable coming back, but I don't know that I would say that I enjoyed it personally. I found it to be very frustrating, I guess.
Why was it frustrating for you?
Well, it's just not fun to like be dealing with like anxieties that you kind of can't totally answer to, and like having so many questions. You just have so many questions, and there's like this tough thing where like, I had always like loved my body, and particularly when I tore my ACL, like particularly right afterwards, there was a lot of like, oh, well, you could do a hamstring graft, but you're a woman, and so those often re-tear. You could do a patella graft, but often those, you end up with tendinopathy because you're a woman. And I was like, wow, like my body kind of sucks. Like, like, so that was kind of tough too, to like have that kind of mental like feeling of like, something that's like so attached to you, something that you like spent so long and like lived in and has done so much for you, and just kind of like you sort of feel like you're fighting it mentally, because you mentally feel like you're ready to race, but physically your body won't let you, and you're like, it's hard to not like almost take it personally against your body.
You let me down.
But then like but then that also like once you do make it back, then you're like so grateful for your body and like all that it has done, and
Right.
like it's like amazing ability to heal.
Yeah.
And that, so there's kind
Yeah,
of two
no,
sides.
100% for sure. I mean, I think another thing goes into it is the team around you. I mean, that's when you really know who your friends are, and you really know who you can talk to when times are not going well. I mean, those coaches or sports psychs that are there for support and there to kind of build you back up and put all the pieces back together so you are good to go when you get back in the gate. I mean, there's not too many, and that's, I mean, because so many people are off doing their own things, living their own life, and you're stuck going through that rehab process and everything else. So, I mean, that team, I think, really kind of propels you forward. I mean, I know for me, my PT Mark Moeller was absolutely fantastic, and when I went in and met with him, he was like, listen, the number one thing you need to know is they did a great job, you have a great graft. And it was easy for me to start to compartmentalize it when I was like, okay, so if I feel this pain and I hurt it, like and it's hurting me when we're doing these heel slides, whatever else, like I'm not re-hurting my knee, right? This is all like good pain. He's like, yeah, you cannot re-injure your knee with all the stuff that we're doing. I was like, okay, then pain doesn't matter to me going through I mean, I got full range of motion back super quick because I was like, okay, I can break that down super easy. It's just pain. I'm not re-hurting anything. And boom, you get that range of motion back. And I think that helps with the confidence, right? You have the team, you have the support, and the COE. I mean, you had a great staff there to be able to kind of help and build the right program for you, because each person's unique. You know, you're like, I want to be back. All right, you tried the slow and methodical. Okay, let's tear this up and let's go back to the drawing board. I'm going to be competing this year. Let's go.
Yeah. We had a joke when I got injured the second time that my strength coach, I was like, are you gonna quit, Bob, now that you have to deal with me for 6 months straight again?
Buckle up.
which was like funny until like I said that, and then somebody else at the COE said that, and I was like, no, you don't get to say that. Only I get to make that joke. but yeah, it is like that was like something I was like super grateful for, was like the people who worked with me were incredible. Like, you know, like my surgeon, like, you know, surgeons, they work with like hundreds of people a day, and I could like text him and be like, hey, like this is going on, and he would like get back to me right away. Like he would call me like, you know, once a week early on, and then like switch to like almost like every other week for like the whole time that I was injured. And like if we, you know, had like a question about something, like we could just like get a hold of him. And like those people are you know, really great, and it is very impressive to see what they can do. And it was really cool because like I'm always like, I'm like a knowledge fiend. Like I think we have that in common. And like, so yeah, I was like reading this stuff, and then like you get like information from your strength trainer, and it's like, oh, like we're trying this like super new like cutting edge thing that like might give you like a you know 1% like help. Like we did a lot of like, we were doing like eccentric, what we called like overload training early on in my second rehab. Like they had basically like just read these articles about people doing essentially like really hard eccentric work on their good leg, and that actually like would make their injured leg stronger, or like keep it from atrophying as much. And like even though that was like a small thing, and like, you know, maybe wouldn't give that much of an edge, like
Right.
we were willing to do that. And like people who are willing to like always be looking for that stuff, who aren't like, this is good enough, or like you're, you know, like doing rehab once a week is probably fine, you know, who are like, we will do as much as is necessary to help you. And like we are always like hunting and looking for like that slight edge for you.
Yeah, which is awesome. I mean, that's really what you want to, like I said, to fit your personality. I mean, you're going to be in there every day, and you'll take as much as they're going to give you. Like, okay, let's do this eccentric. So, I mean, for eccentric, that's what, 2 or 3 seconds on the way down, and then explosive on the way up. I mean, would that kind of be like squat training and kind of some things like that. With the, would they have you do with like one leg, with the one good leg, or would it be both legs as well? It's kind of just working everything in there to get it back.
So we were doing, so this was like before I was even like weight bearing or anything on the injured leg. So we were doing like, yes, you do like we did one in a Smith machine. Do you know what a Smith machine is? It's like one of the machines with the wires, so it kind of like holds the weight. So we would like put weight on, and there were like two people on either side of the machine, and I would be doing like a single leg squat down with all the weight, and then they literally like the people would pick up part of the weight.
Yeah.
And I would go up, and then they'd put it back on. And like, you know, that required like two people anytime I had to do that to like take time out of their day to like pick up weight for me. And like, not to mention like set the whole thing up and everything. And that was like something that we did early on. And like, you know, we were doing like BFR training, which, you know, through Avital, like is like, it's the type of training that it just like, I always say like, because you'll like cry if you have an excess of any emotion, like whether it's like, you know, you'll cry because you're happy or sad or angry or whatever. Like I say, like you would end up crying in it, and I think it was because like effort isn't an emotion, and if you like put that much effort, like you just would start crying at the end, and you didn't know why. Like it was super painful, but it wasn't just the pain. Like you weren't like in like that much pain, but it was just so hard, and you were like doing so much that you were just like crying. And I remember just like crying and like doing like leg presses, like single leg presses, and you're just like, it is kind of incredible. And you walk, and you don't like notice it so much when you do it yourself, but you like, that was like one of the amazing things about rehabbing with Avital, was just like watching somebody else go through it was like very inspiring to like see like how deep like somebody else was digging. You were like, oh, like, yeah, like this sucks, and we're gonna like have it suck together.
Right. Yeah, no, it's nice to have that bond and have someone to go through it with, for sure. And for those out there that don't know, BFR would be blood flow restriction. So essentially, if it's your injured leg, if it's your right leg or whatever, they would wrap something around and essentially cut off the blood flow to your leg. And that is supposed to give several different benefits with creating muscle growth and kind of getting that thing nice and strong again, right? So they cut off the blood flow until there's essentially nothing left except the tears.
Yeah, your leg turns entirely purple. Just imagine like putting a tourniquet on your leg and then telling yourself to do like single leg squats or like lunges or something with it. It doesn't really make any sense seemingly, but it has a lot of proven effects. There's a great article in Outside Magazine. Look up like Outside Magazine, BFR, and maybe Delphi is like the company that makes them, but Outside Magazine has a great article.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, it is. And the same thing with the Smith machine, if people are wondering, that is like essentially it's a squat. It'd be like a squat rack, except it's got assisted. Like if you don't have someone there to be able to spot for you, it's not the same effect as you're squatting, but it's fairly close. Like you have a barbell, and you know you can squat a bunch of weight by yourself, and you don't have to worry if you don't have someone there to spot you or anything else. It kind of just assists you on the way up and on the way down a little bit. So for those out there that are not total meatheads and spending all day in the gym.
Yeah, these doable.
So for you now, I mean, you're off and running, and Val d'Isere is where you head to tomorrow, right? Or, well, you're going to Copper, but the first event is in Val d'Isere, right?
So our first downhill is in Val d'Isere, but we have a super, I think a couple weekends before that in summer at Switzerland, which is the first weekend of racing. I want to say it's the 5th and 6th, but it might be the 4th and 5th of December. So those are our first competitions back. And yeah, I know like things are a little rough in Europe, but I think they're hoping to get those off.
Yeah, I'm sure that they'll, you know, I know the protocols kind of coming up and all the different testing and stuff you've had to go through the summer every time to go in the co. You guys got to follow all the procedures, all the masks, all that stuff, which is good. And, you know, hopefully it'll be interesting, all the air travel there. But I mean, kind of bouncing all around. But it's like once you get to Europe, you guys will just be taking buses and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, we have like our own kind of fleet of cars. And
it's a lot of gear.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gear.
So much gear. People are like, oh, like, where are your skis in like this car that you're driving around? And you're like, no, the skis have their own car. There's so many skis. They need their own vehicle. And
how many skis are you rolling with? Like, what will you bring to an event?
I want to say I've got like maybe 25 pairs of skis right now.
25 different pairs. And then they're all within those different pairs. All of them will have a different wax. All of them will have different tunes on the edges. So some will be sharper, some will be more dull. And then the waxes are all, because they do like, I mean, we don't have nearly that in mobile skiing. It's not really, you know, you have like one wax you'll put on, you have your one tune. Or not. Some people don't even do that. They just let it ride. Factory tune. It's good for like 2 years,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, so generally like day to day, we try to have the same like sharpness unless we're testing things out. So we test a lot through the summer. So we've actually like, you know, of those like 25 skis, like it took like, you know, over the years, like we get skis in and then we kind of like, like send the not as good skis back to the factory and those get given to other people. So if you've ever like received like a pair of like, you know, some important person skis, those were reject skis.
Oh, you're getting the losers. Those are the losers. They couldn't get it done.
We keep the best skis, and so we're always kind of like working through those and like finding new models, finding new skis. But generally, like once we get into like race season, then we kind of like we pick a model, we pick a like setup, and we kind of mostly run with that, unless like, you know, depends on the person a little bit. I tend to run like with pretty much the same setup, but occasionally people like have like a different setup for like really icy conditions versus snot and things like that. But those people are like nerds.
But I mean, it is crazy to think of all that different preparation. I mean, you spend the whole summer kind of doing that testing. And I think if you're not in the ski world or in that reality, I mean, I don't think people are really aware of that. You know, they turn on NBC, watch the event, and it's like, okay, yeah, but I mean, there's so much that goes into the tuning team. I mean, you have a team that, you know, tunes your skis, looks after all your gear, and makes sure everything's perfect from the detail of what the temperature is going to be from when you push out of the start gate to what the snow's like at the bottom. Because when you're doing it downhill, I mean, you're going through a lot of different elevations and things like that. So, I mean, it could be slushy at the bottom, and then it is completely rock solid as you're pushing out of the gate, right?
Yeah, for sure. That can happen. That is like oftentimes kind of the worst conditions is when it changes through the slope. But yeah, so we have we have a, you know, between every like 1 to 2 athletes has their own ski serviceman, ski technician. So that there's a whole person in charge of, they're essentially kind of like a caddy if you watch golf or whatever.
Right. Sure.
It's like picking out like the best like club, or in this case pair of skis. They're also prepping those skis. So a ski technician will, you know, say we're getting on the hill at 7 a.m. They wake up at, you know, 5:30 or 6, you know, get breakfast, get ready, drive to the hill, get on the hill with you, ski with you, are usually lapping your clothes with you because it's cold in those spandex suits. And so we lapped our clothes.
Right.
And also like there in case like something's wrong, something breaks, skis aren't sharp enough, skis are too sharp, whatever. And then they get done. You get to the end of the day, you bring all the skis off the hill. You usually have on a training, you know, on a race day, you usually have like 2 to 3 pairs of skis on the hill. You have your warm-up skis, you have your race skis. But when you're training, you'll often have 4 or 5 pairs of skis on the hill. Then they're working with 2 people. So that's 8 pairs of skis on the hill. Maybe up to 10 pairs of skis, depending if you like also have like a GS pair for warm up. So then they get down, they eat lunch quickly, Then they tune skis for, 8 hours. They get done at 10 o'clock at night. They go to bed, they wake up at 5:30 and they do it all over again. So like, and then like when you win Olympic gold, like nobody hears from them.
Right.
Like
the unspoken heroes. The unspoken
to
heroes.
go on Letterman, even though like you look at like Lindsey Vohn's technician, he won Olympic gold with her, but he also won Olympic gold with like Patrick Ortlieb, who was like a ski racer back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And like, so he in some ways has like more gold medals than Lindsey Vonn. He has all Lindsey Vonn medals, and then he has like his from like other athletes, but nobody's ever heard of him.
Yeah.
Where like everybody's heard of Lindsey Vonn. So that's like, those guys work their butts off. And I think that side of the sport is super cool. Like if you look it up and you hear things about like technicians and, they're always looking for like what wax is running, because you don't just like put wax on. You have to like, it's kind of a mixture between like intense science chemistry class and like a little bit of black magic. Like those guys are out there, they're taking snow temperatures all the time. They're, looking at, what the snow crystals are like, how hard the surface is, and things like that. And then trying to match a wax that will be fastest for those conditions. And if you took like Lindsey Vonn at, any World Cup or like Olympic Games, and you put her on like the worst skis on the hill, like, first of all, she probably would have crashed because they're probably like inexpertly tuned, and so she wouldn't have like really known how to ski on them. But even if she had ski on them, maybe 20th place. Like that's how important skis are. They can make a big difference. Even if you're the best skier in the world, if you have trash skis on, then
it makes a difference.
Go home.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what's the difference between, because you said you had your warm up and then you have your racing, like what's the difference between those two pairs of skis? Like you have your warm up pair and then you have your competition, like so you switch out, you go into the other pair. Is it just the wax is going to wear off on the warm up skis, so you need to have the other ones that have the fresh wax on, or how does that, like, what's the difference there?
Well, yes, you have the wax that you race on is like good for like one run, maybe two.
Okay.
But then also like a lot of times because I warm up not on downhill skis for downhill, and oftentimes not even on Super G skis. So a lot of racers warm up on either Super G or GS skis. Almost nobody warms up on downhill skis.
Why is that?
Because they're kind of just like too big, and like usually like I want to personally, I a lot of times ski on GS skis, which are very different from downhill skis, because I want to kind of get used to like turning. I want to be ready to turn. Like my ability to like get in a tuck and like go straight is like, I feel pretty confident in that, but I want to be able to like be ready for the turns. So I a lot of times warm up on GS skis. Super G skis are often really similar to downhill skis, but they're a little bit shorter, a little bit less like
stiff.
Kind of probably a little less stiff, but like also just like easier to kind of move around, and then you can make a little bit smaller turns on them. A lot of times our warm-up slopes are kind of shorter, narrower, not as good. And it's not like you have your like training runs. When you're actually running on the downhill slope, you'll always use downhill skis. But a lot of times the warm-up slope isn't anything like a downhill court. So you don't like, there isn't like a second place to be like, oh, well, here I'm going to ski downhill, but not in the court.
Gotcha.
Because downhill requires kind of specific setups. But occasionally, like, I ran on downhill skis before my first training run when I was coming back from injury, because I literally hadn't skied on them. Mm-hmm. I hadn't skied on downhill skis. So I was like, I should probably just do this to like have done it before I like kick out of a start gate on them and like get a feel for those long skis. And then occasionally you'll do them, very occasionally you'll get to run on the downhill track. And then a lot of times people pull out downhill skis, unless sometimes when they do that, downhill skis aren't allowed. You have to run on Super G or GS skis.
Okay.
So,
right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Now, when I was looking at the different schedule for some of the downhill and Super G, and I don't know if it's just for this year with COVID going on, but I saw that there's like, it said like 4 times downhill at Val d'Isere. Like, so does that mean it's 4 separate World Cup events at Val d'Isere? And is that because of COVID, or is that normally you go to a stop, they do 2 downhills at it, or how does that kind of work with the schedule?
So on the website, they signify like 4 times downhill. So that's, if it's 4, that means there's 2 runs and then 2 races.
Okay.
So no venue has more than like 2 scheduled of basically any event right now. Occasionally there's like, because of COVID this year, there's a couple of like kind of double stops. Like the men are going to Val d'Isere twice, although I'm pretty sure they're actually planning on skiing on a different slope the second time they go there. Okay. But you'll run, usually World Cups are scheduled for maximum of 2. So like St. Moritz, we're going to run 2 Super Gs. So we'll run 2 Super G World Cups. Then we go to Val d'Isere where we'll have 2 training runs. Then we'll have downhill race, Super G race. So the whole weekend will take like 5 days or whatever. And then you go on to the next place. So a lot of places just have 1 downhill and 1 Super G. That's standard. But occasionally they have 2 downhill scheduled, which usually are makeups. Usually they only originally schedule 1 downhill, but then obviously because of COVID, they've scheduled 2 downhill some places.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I was looking at that, so I was kind of curious how that different breakdown kind of works for it. So that makes sense. Now, when it comes to the travel, I mean, how do you prepare yourself for that? Because you already have so much, and then obviously this is going to be a different year, but I'm just saying normal times, like you essentially live in Europe for 6 months. And how do you prep yourself for kind of a goal set, or what kind of habits do you have for essentially living out of a suitcase for a long period of time?
Yeah, well, for one, we have a lot of bags to pack. So I am traveling to Copper with like 3 duffel bags essentially, which are like big, heavy duffel bags. And so that's like for one, like when I'm on the road, like I want my own yoga mat. Like, you gotta have your
stuff. Sure.
Simple stuff. Mentally, I've kind of always loved travel. I'm kind of different than some people. I kind of love being on the road and kind of packing up and like leaving a place and that kind of like clean slate that you have when that happens. But you definitely order your Christmas presents online and have them delivered and things like that. But I think mentally you do have to like roll a lot with the punches and then realize like what you kind of need, like and if you like have things that you need, then like you got to make sure that you like bring those or like kind of mentally prepare for that, and then you got to be willing to let go of the rest. So like I travel with my own pillow because occasionally you go somewhere and you really just hate the pillow. Right. And that was kind of like my first like full year on the World Cup tour. Like we went to World Champs and I had been totally fine with the pillows everywhere else. And then we went to World Champs and it was just like 2 weeks of like, this thing sucks.
So and that's like, not the event you want to have that at. Yeah.
No, for sure. And I was like, this to happen like at the Olympics, like, or like World Champs or whatever. So like, I'm just going to like deal with this. And so you kind of, you bring those things. And then, yeah, like luckily I don't have like a lot of dietary restrictions because that can be really tough for people traveling on the road who are like super gluten-free or things like that. That can be very tough.
Yeah, that's gotta be definitely brutal going somewhere and you don't really have the options. I mean, I know for different times when we would go to places, you're eating what you're eating, and it's, or you cannot eat either this or nothing. And it is one of those things, though. I mean, that's a great point about when you're on the road and being able to kind of control what you can control in that situation. Like, it's a great learning experience. Boom. Now I know I can bring a pillow with me every single stop, and that's in my control. And out of the 30 bags or whatever, when you take to Europe, like, it's not like, it's the same thing as like, it's a matter of when you're going to lose a bag. So the important stuff that you can actually kind of control and keep, like, all right, that's on my backpack. That's what I need, like, every step of the way, you know. I mean, that really kind of makes sense, because there are so many things that are just out of your control. For us, it was not nearly as bad. You have like one duffel bag, usually one duffel bag, and then your ski bag. So and then backpack. So you had, you know, 3 bags you're kind of carrying around with, and not like 20.
Yeah. But it's like one thing that like I learned when I like got to the World Cup was like you always like you know this from moguls, but you always like bring your boots on the plane with you. Mm-hmm. But we also bring a second pair of boots, not necessarily on the plane with you, but just like in your baggage, because if you break a pair of boots, or you have like, you know, something goes wrong with one pair, you like lose them, like somebody steals them, who knows? Like, then you have another pair that's exactly the same, that's broken in, you break them in the summer, and then you can literally just like slide those on your feet and go. And like those things are super important for us. And like, you know, we have so much gear for Alpine that you do end up with a lot of bags. Not as many as we used to. I heard that the girls used to travel with like everybody had 8 bags.
That's crazy.
We were talking about, which is insane. Then I know some people who, on the same thread of like me needing like the extra pillow, like they get annoyed by having a ton of bags, so they don't travel with that much stuff.
Yeah.
So like that could be like maybe your thing is like having to pack up 4 bags every time, and so you only have 1. So you just got to figure out like what you need, and then also like when you have that much stuff, like for me, like whenever I pack up, like everything goes in the same place, and then that way I always know if something's missing, because like you know, you never want to like walk out and then be like, oh, I left my gloves, you know, whatever. And I'm not going to be able to get another pair for 6 months.
Right. Yeah, no, it's definitely, I'm sure knowing you, I'm sure you got to have a packing list. Every stop, you got to have everything broken down and what you need to bring. Right. And I think that that's important, because that's how you're able to keep track of a lot of those things, as you talk about the things that you can control. And when you're going into a ski season and you kind of start to reach, you know, obviously the level that you're at and you're taking it seriously, like, you should just have a packing list. I mean, like, you know, my mom used to make one for me when I was like 10, and I would go and, you know, be like, all right, yeah, sunscreen. I wouldn't think of that. And, you know, oh, I got to put sunscreen on? Damn it.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it really is one of those simple things. And once you kind of get into that mode of going to new places, I mean, I really think it makes a big difference when you have the comfort level of the things that really matter to you. And whether it's something small or something big, and you can only control so many things, you know. And it's interesting when you're going on the hill. I think it helps mentally to take solace in the things that you can control, because when you get out on the hill, there are so many things that you can't control what the weather's going to be. You can't control what the course is going to be like. You can't control, you know, in our sport, what the judges are going to like, you know, you just go out and you can only do you, really. Right. So, and to get into that right frame of mind, I mean, for you, what helps you get in the right frame of mind, like on game day and in the start gate? Is it the fact that you've checked everything off and everything's been marked, and in your mind, okay, that puts me in the right mindset, everything's been checked, dotted all the I's, you know, crossed all the T's, now it's just time to push out and be aggressive?
Yeah, a lot of times it is kind of that. I mean, I think like my race day routine is pretty similar throughout. Like I you know, I wake up in the morning, I go and I like warm up. So that's like a jog and like some movement stretches, things like that. And then, I go to breakfast, I, put my ski stuff on, and then I get on the hill, and then I do like, we always start with inspection usually, and then we'll do warm up, like a couple free ski warm up runs. And then I usually go back into hospitality. I take all of my stuff off. Usually there's a big break in there too. So, and then I do another warm up, like another full kind of warm up for my body. And like through that, I've been like visualizing and like, picturing the course. Like we have the same courses every year. I know you guys kind of have that too in moguls. But like, in the tech events and in Super G, you don't necessarily have the same course set, but in downhill, it's always the same. So you kind of like been visualizing it for the last like year since you went there, you've been over it in your head. And then, so exactly where all the turns are, you're ready for it. You kind of like already have the course memorized. And then you're just looking at like the changes and the different things and the snow conditions and stuff like that. And then I think like, yeah, so for me, it's always about like being able to like look back and be like, well, I've done everything that I can. And so all I have to do is ski the way I know how to ski and not worry about the rest. And yeah, sometimes you get down to the bottom, and I've been there when like the snowstorm comes in halfway and you're in 10th, and that you just skied a run that would have been on the podium if you'd run number 2 instead of number 20, but you can't do anything about that. So that's just like, I always hang my hat on doing my best, not on doing the best. And so that's always what I come back to.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. That's a good attitude, certainly to have for it. And I think that plays a big role into how some of those results come, right? I mean, you got to have the right attitude. Attitude is everything for sure. And with you, how do you bounce back from, some of those negatives? Is it just, hey, I did the best that I can and go back, same routine tomorrow? Or, what is it that kind of helps you bounce back from the negatives? Because obviously it's always easier with the positives. You're riding on the high and like, okay, same routine, let's get this again tomorrow. But when things are not clicking, what is it for you that kind of helps you?
Yeah, a lot of times, one of the things that I do when like conditions are bad, and this is very like personal to me, is I tend to be like, me, I'm kind of like snarky. And so I often like, I'm very much a realist. And so I believe in like stating things how they are. I've been to races where I'm like, this course is a shit show and it's going to suck and running it is going to suck. And I am not a like rosy, positive person necessarily. Like I try to like ground myself in reality very much. And that way, that to me, like sometimes being like this set is messed up, or like the snow on that one turn sucks. It allows me to take some pressure off of myself to be like perfect all the time, because you can't control all those like side variables. And so if they're not perfect, like you might as well admit it to yourself. Like, I remember being at Europa Cup and it had snowed like a foot, and we were running these downhill races. They'd moved up the finish. There was like a turn in the finish, which was really sketchy. Corrine Suter, who was young at the time, also running the Europa Cup, and now she's like the best downhill and Super G skier in the world. She broke her leg there. In the finish. And I was like, this course is like fucked. Like, beep that later, but this is so messed up. And I was telling one of my teammates like this, and she was like, I think like we're gonna ski it and it's gonna be great. And I was like, okay, speak for yourself, because I think this is gonna be terrible. like we got to the bottom at the race and I did really well and she did not, and she was super pissed. And I was like, you just didn't like accept the reality of the situation. Like,
Yeah.
knew that like skiing this course wasn't going to feel good. It wasn't going to be, you know, even fun. Like, it was just like, you just have to do as well as you can in whatever conditions you have. And that's always been my attitude. So sometimes I can be like negative and I can be like outright with that. And some of my teammates, I have to like kind of not say it to them because they're always like, they're totally the opposite. They have to be super positive. But like, yeah, I'll get to the bottom of the course and I'll talk to my coaches and I'll be like, that was messed up. Like,
this is a shit show.
That storm came in and that was like totally screwed me. And we'll be like, yeah. And that's sometimes how like I have to deal with it, is I just have to like vocalize it and be super real about it and not necessarily be positive all the time, because I'm just not that way.
Right.
That's just
no, I think that's super. I mean, it's interesting. It's definitely insightful. I mean, I could definitely see it. You know what it is? It fits your personality, though. I mean, that's just who, you know, you're blunt, you're to the point, you're honest, you're open. And that's, you know, I think it's all great qualities. And I think that helps you succeed on the hill. You know, I mean, I think having going through those courses or going through life with rose colored glasses and then you get hit in the face with a 2x4, like, oh shit, this is a different beat. Like, I think it's better to, you know, it's definitely an interesting perspective, and I think a good way to think about how to game plan and just being open and honest. And it also like puts a little levity into the situation. You know, you can kind of laugh it off, like, man, this course is a shit show. Like, I'm still gonna go out and do the best I can, but like, just calling spade a spade here. This is what we're dealing with. Like, you know, that flight was awful. I did not sleep at all. This pillow at World Championships sucks. I would rather sleep with no pillow. And, you know, some of those things you kind of have to laugh at and give yourself a second to be like, okay, now moving on. I got it out there and now we can move on and let's go compete.
Yeah, I find that like, kind of like vocalizing or like just like being honest about like those issues like lessens the pressure on myself. Because if I don't like it, if I'm trying to pretend like things are great, then that means that like I'm expected to do so much more, which sometimes isn't reasonable to expect of yourself. So
no, definitely. I mean, I think that's a great attitude to have for sure. And I think it's already shown some results this far, and I know you got to be excited for the year coming up. One question I wanted to ask for people kind of starting out and getting into Alpine, and whether they're up there at Mount Hood summer ski camps in the summer and they're just kind of getting into it and getting their way, like what advice would you kind of have for them as they're starting out, figuring out their way through the fears and doubts of kind of getting into the racing world?
Well, I think like for one, a lot of people in the youth levels of sport, this isn't necessarily like people just starting out, but people kind of like getting more into it. I you know, obviously now I have a technician who takes care of my skis, but I did my skis for a good portion of my career. Did my own skis, and I was very diligent about that, and I made sure that like my equipment was always spot on. I think with ski racing, a lot of kids can have trouble because their edges aren't sharp enough every day, or you know, they don't have wax on their skis, so then they're on the flats and they're not getting the speed that they would in a race. And then they get into a race and then they like, you know, file their edges and they're super aggressive and they're hooking all over the place. And first of all, I think that that's dangerous because, you know, you're not used to something, and then like having edges that are too sharp at certain times and not very sharp at other times is very dangerous. So I feel that like one of the big things that helped me through my career was being super diligent about my equipment and making sure that it was as well tuned as I could make it every day. And I spent a lot of time on that. Like, I would come home from skiing up at Park City when I was in high school, and we'd get back at 6:00, and you know, I'd spend another hour doing my skis before I moved on to like eating and doing my homework and all that sort of stuff. But I think that that was super important, so that every day when I got on my skis, I was getting on the same tune. So I think that that's a really important thing. I think that, you know, watching skiing is really important. I know a lot of kids who get pretty far without ever watching World Cup skiing, without watching like the best skiers. And I'm always a little bit baffled by that, because I think you can learn a lot from kind of what the best skiers do and what they're good
Absolutely. Yeah.
at. And kind of learning technique and learning what looks good. But that at the same time, like, don't necessarily like look too much into that. A lot of times, like, what I work on is very basic. It's the same thing I was working on when I was 14 years old. Like, stand over the outside ski, you know, have level shoulders. Still working on that.
Still working
because skiing is pretty basic. I know a lot of coaches these days get really into kind of cutting edge skiing, and can sometimes lose sight of that. So that's those are kind of the big things to me, I think, is like, one, having equipment dialed, and two, like, watching the sport, being immersed in the sport, and working on those kind of basic technique things.
Yeah, I mean, I think also one of the things that really kind of speaks to, at least from hearing you, is just the passion about it. Like, to be able to go through and watch, and not only does it speak to your discipline of going home and doing that every single day, like, okay, I'll get schoolwork, I'll get to this, but I got to make sure everything's waxed, I got to make sure everything's prepped. And then it also kind of, at least to me, speaks to the passion of you just being totally immersed in it, right? I mean, you have to love to watch it and love to, you know, have those different heroes or whoever it is, and as much as you can kind of get your hands on the material, or just be able to watch skiing. I mean, it's so much more accessible now compared to when I was growing up. Like, YouTube was kind of just starting to get going, and then it was like, wow, this is really cool. And it was not as mainstream, obviously, as Alpine and everything else. And we used to have this really cool website called Ski to Bosses. And I think it was the French head coach would video all of the runs, and he would just put it up on this website, and you'd have the podium, you know, 1, 2, 3, and you'd be able to watch and every single run. And it was so cool to be able to check that out. And I think if you really want to be passionate, or to have success in the sport, you have to immerse yourself in it. It's not like it's like it's like you have to do it if you want to be good, or really go as far as you can be. And that's simply for a love for it. I mean, you know, when did you fall in love with it? What was it for you that kind of dragged you in?
I mean, I have wanted, basically, like, as long as I can remember, I've wanted to be a ski racer. Like, I think when I was asked, like, in like kindergarten, it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was like, I want to be a ski racer. My family was always really into ski racing, and my dad watched the Alpine races pretty compulsively through the kind of early 2000s era. There was like a period of time in kind of like the late, like from like, I don't know, 2007 to 2010, where it was really hard to watch Alpine, or we at least couldn't. So we didn't watch during that period, but like through like 2006, like we had all that stuff. So we were super passionate about it. I think the interesting thing that I have noticed, like, now being like so far into the sport, is like, yeah, you really do have to, like, you have to dot every T and cross every I and cross every T.
I know what you meant.
Because like the amount of people who make it are very few and far between. Like, there really is a very small portion of people who make it through, and they are super dedicated and have kind of, I always talk about habits, like always having kind of the habit of a champion, like always looking for that extra 1%. Like, oh, am I going to am I going to watch ski racing or am I going to watch cartoons? Obviously, I'm going to watch ski racing.
Yeah.
Am I going to tune my skis or am I going to like do my homework? Obviously, I'm going to tune my skis. Like, am I going to, like, you always choose skiing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you make that a habit from the minute you start, it's easier than trying to like, get to the point where you're 19 and you're not where you want to be and being like, oh, like I need to figure out a way to like make this work now, because that's just really hard and you're playing catch up.
Yeah.
And so few spots that you can't really play catch up. You have to be what you think is 5 steps ahead from the beginning.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think habit of a champion is definitely a great way to think about it. And I think it really does make that extra difference, I mean, whether it's constantly going and I think because it translates, the more you're around it, it kind of builds that passion and you love to watch it and you love to be around it. And then it also propels you for when the burnout is going to happen. Like eventually you're going to like, it goes, everyone, when you're doing it from 6 years old up until you're going to go through burnouts, you're going to go through times like, man, I'm a hamster on the wheel right now. Things are not clicking. Things are not working. And that passion that you build up from when you're 5, 6 years old help you through those rough times. You're like, man, I just don't want to be on the hill today. Like this is and kind of help you kind of grind through that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. And I think also like, yeah, for parents out there, I think like what you care about, like my parents were really into the sport and they got really into the sport. Like kids watch that too. And then like, finally, like if you like really do have those kind of like habits of a champion, like not everybody is going to be the best. Unfortunately, like there's some luck involved in all of this. And I happened to get lucky and I know people who didn't. But if you build up those habits, like those are totally transferable.
Yeah.
Like the ability to like always be looking for like, how can I do this better? How can I do that better? How can I improve? That is something that you can always take into another realm. Like whether it's school or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think like doing sport and doing like skiing of any type is so valuable for kids.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I know you got to finish packing up and getting ready to rock on the road there for Copper, but I really appreciate you taking the time. For people out there, where can they go follow along on social media?
I'm on Instagram at Breezy Johnson Ski and Twitter at _Breezy Johnson. Unfortunately, Twitter won't let you make a handle that's as long as Breezy Johnson Ski. They're so rude. Rude. And I think Facebook is also at Breezy Johnson Ski, but you can look up Breezy Johnson and I'm on there. So
perfect. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time. I really appreciate it and looking forward to watching you kick some ass this year.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye, everybody.
Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little bell button so you get notified every time a new episode drops. Thanks.